Our Scotland editor Sarah Smith is at Holyrood for us now. Sarah, what's your assessment of the result?
We've learned something very important about Scottish politics, which is nearly 2 years after the referendum, it is still all about independence. The parties argued about tax, health and education, but mostly yes voters voted SNP, increasing their vote and returning them to government, and largely no voters voted Tory, the party who say they're the real defenders of the Union, and they delivered a seismic shock to Scottish politics.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock, it's Friday morning. Welcome to a special election edition of Good Morning Scotland.
Labour have a dreadful night.
And Ruth Davidson's Conservatives look like they'll be the new official opposition in the Scottish Parliament.
Scots awoke this morning to news many thought they would never hear. Labour, once so dominant, beaten into third place by the Tories. Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Tory leader, barely mentioned in her campaign that she is a Conservative, promising simply to stand up to the SNP and against a second independence referendum.
I know that there are thousands of people that voted for me and my team last night who aren't natural Conservatives, and they're probably quite surprised that they find themselves even considering voting Conservative. But they did because they wanted me to do a specific job for them. They wanted somebody to stand up to the SNP and say, you cannot ignore our voice, you cannot ignore the decision that we made as a country and try and drag us back to a second referendum.
Ruth Davidson is certainly not your average Tory. A working-class, kickboxing, openly gay woman, always game for a good photo op. She can talk to voters other Conservatives simply cannot reach.
Scotland Street now has a Tory MSP for the first time. It's just one of their remarkable gains across Scotland. How much of a surprise is this? Well, just a couple of days ago, Ruth Davidson, who won this constituency, told me she didn't think she had a chance of taking it.
But the voters in Edinburgh Central responded to a very effective campaign.
I think Ruth Davidson went out the last few months really campaigning, really going for the fact that they could do a good opposition. And I think whoever came up with that strategy really hit the nail on the head.
And what happens to Labour now? What could they say, do you think, to recover in Scotland?
Oh, I don't know what happens with Labour. Traditionally, it always used to be Labour everywhere in Scotland, you know, and it's just funny now that they just don't seem to have anything to say.
What can the Scottish Labour leader say about being bludgeoned into third place?
How do you explain Labour's losses last night?
Well, what we saw in Scotland last night was the referendum arguments of the past being rerun again. So strong support for the SNP from those people that had voted yes and cities that had voted yes, and strong support for the Tories in areas that were very dominantly no. That's to my deep regret, because I thought Scotland might be interested in moving on from those arguments of the past, and that's not happened overnight.
If Scottish voters don't move on, Labour will struggle to find a purpose in these new politics. Whilst Nicola Sturgeon's SNP increased their vote, denied an overall majority but ready to rule and still dreaming of an independent Scotland. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Edinburgh.